The year is 1979. From 1976 to 1979, nothing extraordinary happened in the village of Montelago, Italy. But on the night of 23rd September, 1386 in the Gregorian calendar, a terrifying event occurred. Late at night, villagers saw a house ablaze in the distance. By the time they arrived to extinguish the fire, it was already too late. Inside, they found 4 bodies, gruesomely burned beyond recognition. The remaining rooms of the house were untouched. The police arrived the following morning, and the bodies were taken for autopsy. Upon hearing the news, Federico, the eldest son of the victims, rushed from the nearby town of Palermo. His mother, father, younger sister, and beloved wife were all gone. In his grief, relatives tried to comfort him. The investigation revealed a shocking twist. The bodies had been killed before the fire started. As the investigation continued, Federico's 2 younger brothers, Giovanni and Luca, came under suspicion. They had been involved in an ongoing feud with their father, which led the family to move to this isolated area. The police arrested Giovanni and Luca, but something strange was discovered during the autopsy. The murderer's handprints were abnormally large, something that couldn't belong to Giovanni or Luca, who were in custody. Despite a thorough investigation, the police couldn't find conclusive evidence. Giovanni and Luca, unable to prove their innocence, were sentenced to 12 and 10 years in prison, respectively. But the true cause of the murders remained a mystery. Fast forward to 1982, when a middle-aged farmer named Antonio Rossi from Montelago is caught up in another strange occurrence. During the off-season when the fields flooded, he and his cousins, Marco and Silvio, came up with a plan to run a small poultry farm. After a few days of work, Marco and Silvio suggested they catch fish at night, promising that it would be profitable due to high demand in nearby towns. One night, after a meal, Antonio felt uneasy and didn't want to go. Marco and Silvio insisted that it was a perfect night for fishing due to the full moon, and Antonio reluctantly agreed. They set out in their boat, heading towards a small bridge they regularly fished at, about 5 kilometers from their village. As they arrived, they heard faint cries coming from the bridge. Marco and Silvio went ahead and found a woman sitting by the side of the bridge, sobbing over a body wrapped in white cloth. The woman explained that her husband had died unexpectedly while visiting relatives, and she had been stranded there alone, as her family had already left. She begged them to help her return to her home in the nearby village of Montebruno. Despite their initial reluctance, Marco and Silvio agreed to help her, but Antonio was still uneasy. He thought something didn't feel right, but went along with it. The woman seemed familiar, though they couldn't place where they had seen her before. After a long journey, the woman directed them to an unfamiliar house. As they approached, the woman stopped crying and covered her face with a veil. She spoke little and guided them towards a house in a secluded area. Antonio and his cousins felt the eerie atmosphere grow thicker. Inside, a man and woman took the body from the boat, and though they felt they recognized them, their names escaped them. The woman thanked them profusely and promised a reward. When she went inside to fetch it, Antonio and his cousins waited, but after 15 minutes, no one returned. Suspicious, Antonio suggested they leave, but Marco and Silvio refused to go without their reward. As they entered the house, something felt off. It was eerily quiet, and the lights were out. They noticed a faint glow coming from the back of the house, where a bonfire blazed. But to their horror, the body wrapped in white cloth wasn't there. Instead, they found another body on the fire, the same woman who had asked for help. Antonio realized with a shiver that this was the woman who had died in the same tragic event years ago. The events of the past came rushing back, the mysterious fire, the deaths, the unresolved curse. In the rush of realization, Antonio and his cousins ran towards the boat, but Marco suddenly disappeared. In a panic, Antonio and Silvio made their way back to town, and they were horrified to discover Marco's lifeless body in the river. Antonio, knowing that they had been caught in the grip of something supernatural, rushed to tell the villagers what had happened. They were all aware of the terrible significance of the date, 23rd September. That night, the village of Montelago would forever be haunted by the ghosts of the past, unable to escape the terrifying memories of that fateful night.